when I'm walking down the street.
I do want to say to Doni and many of you in this room that over a very long career in this city, all of you have helped me and my colleagues tell the truth and to try to tell.
I may not look like you and you me, but
Take my hat off.
I'm from South Carolina, so I just...
What does this event mean to you, Miss Peggy Morris?
Oh, my heart,
Happy 20th anniversary.
my heart is about loving up on my sisters. Do you know what it feels like to have your sisters in the room? Done.
And dare to be different and unique. I'm gonna be the best me I can be by letting His glory shine through. I am beautiful, I am blessed, but not just what you see in the flesh. I'm free from people, free from myself. There's a
The doctor lived next door to the janitor, to the reverend, and the lawyer. We were together. Now we get so high and mighty that you create stress for your society because you don't like poor black folks either. That's a health problem. Get yourself together so I can stop being taking care of geriatric people and get back to pediatrics. I thank you, Doni, for all you've done. Let's keep doing it for all the more.
letting His glory shine through. Dare to be you, dare to be me, dare to be different and unique. I'm gonna be the best me I can be by letting His glory shine through. And I dare you, I dare you, I dare you to be you.
First name's Doni, last name's Glover. In it to win it for the long haul, baby. We're in the studio today with senior journalist Mr. Charles Robinson. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Doni. How you doing?
Good, good. We also have with us Mr. Dayvon Love of Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle. How are you, Dayvon?
I'm good, Doni. Thanks for having me, man.
Shout out to your partner, Mr. Adam Jackson. Attorney Neil Dubovsky, how are you, sir? Dubo Law.
Good morning, Doni. Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, sir. And Mr. Kenny Brown, publisher of the Northwest Voice. Hello, Mr. Kenny.
Good morning, Doni.
Good. I think we should defer to Mr. Charles Robinson. He spent the most time in Annapolis. He sent a very glowing photo of himself interviewing Speaker Adrian Jones. Charles?
Well, first and foremost, we just ended 90 days of the legislative session. A lot of things came through. This was the first time that Governor Wes Moore presided over the state. He hasn't really done 90 days, but he was there for most of it. I think the thing that was really shocking, if you will, was on the last day, commonly referred to as sine die. It was a lot of commotion leading up to the last minutes. In fact, Delegate Nick Kipke was not really feeling the Speaker of the House, and she basically...
Was anybody drunk?
I can't say for certain, but there was a lot of inebriation in that room. And what I mean by that is that Kipke wanted to challenge a ruling by the chair regarding whether or not people could explain their vote. But as the presiding officer, Speaker Jones gets to pick and who she will recognize. And Kipke, along with several of her Republican colleagues, were very upset. And in fact, they challenged the ruling of the chair, and he literally told her, "You need to sit down." And let me just say this up front. I'm married to a black woman, and that is the last daggone thing you want to say to a black woman, to tell her to sit down. And she gave it as good as she got. And literally with less than 7 minutes left, and it went on and on until finally the parliamentarian Janelle Wilkins said, you can't challenge the chair on this. And what was interesting, I got to talk to her literally the next morning at 11 o'clock, and she was very candid about how she felt about all of this. But with all that said, the session ended.
I take it she didn't like it at all.
Let me just say she was a little testy, and part of that is, and all of you who have been to Annapolis know this from the Speaker of the House. She's a matter of fact woman, and what I mean by that, she ain't gonna tolerate too much BS, and she was not having it that night. So when I saw her the next morning, and I asked her about this, she was very candid in that, one of the things she said to me was, sometimes you have to save people from themselves. And that was, that was kind of like, really? And she said, yes. And part of that is that she says that sometimes the moment, and I when I say the moment is that this was building. And what I mean by that is there was a crime bill on the floor, and everybody was explaining their vote, but probably the most poignant comment came from the newest delegate from Baltimore City, and I'm drawing a blank now, Dayvon. I'm sorry, you got me up early in the morning. I'm trying to remember everything.
Okay, well, look, Kenny has a little. Kenny, you know Adrian Jones. You have some insight on that night.
Yes, I do. And I tell you what, I wasn't in the House chamber. I was over in the Senate chamber as they were discussing that same bill over there, and they were rushing it. And it was apparent it was just gamemanship based on the Republicans. They were just trying to run the clock out and believing that that was the way to block the bill from going through. And I watched them race through it over at the Senate and then try to get it back over to the House. But I do know the Speaker very well. And I left the Senate chamber and went over to the House chamber, and I was appalled when I heard what had happened. And again, the idea was, I will say I was proud of my Speaker and how she handled it, but I'm hoping that she will deal with it more matter-of-factly later on. Because those of us that know the Speaker, Adrian Jones, she's one of these people who want to get along with everybody. And I just believe that sometime in leadership, you can want respect, but sometimes a little fear should come along with that respect. And sometimes I always wonder, do they take her kindness for weakness?
Mm-hmm. Dayvon, you were in Annapolis the last night too, weren't you?
Yes, sir. It was actually interesting. Good morning to everybody. What's interesting is that the last bill that was voted on was a bill that we actually were working on. The bill was to prohibit, given the fact that recreational cannabis will be legal July 1, cannabis is something we've been working on. And one of the aspects that this session was a priority was prohibiting the sole use of odor as the justification for probable cause for stops and searches. And so that's what that bill did. And so that was the bill that Republicans wanted to explain their vote on. I want to give a shout out, some credit to the leadership in both chambers for rushing that bill to get it to the place where it was literally the last bill that was voted out of the House, that certainly the Republicans wanted to have an opportunity to stand up and fuss about. And so I was there when the commotion happened. And I think two things. I think one, you all have already submitted, you all have already said that the Speaker, I think, handled herself well. And the fact that she gets the discretion as the Speaker of the House. But the second thing I would say also is that I think that the Republicans will use the issue that was voted on, this issue of prohibiting odor searches. I think this is an issue that the Republicans will use instead of dealing with the fact that it was disrespectful, the way that they conducted themselves. I think, and I've already seen, Daily Record wrote something about it where they included discussion of the bill. And I think they will use their opposition to the bill as cover for the way that they disrespected Speaker Jones on the floor.
Neil, could this be a carryover of what happened in Tennessee in the reverse?
You read my mind. So everybody hit on all the main points here. The one thing I want to just add with sine die, my understanding, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, is any bill not passed by midnight is shelved and has to come back the next year. And so when we talk about running out the clock, what the Republican delegates were trying to do by explaining their votes was lengthen the process. I think this all happened with about 15 minutes to go before midnight. And they were literally trying to run out the clock by trying to ensure that this bill didn't pass before midnight and therefore would have to be brought up in next year's session. So it was pretty transparent what they were trying to do. But when I heard Delegate Kipke's comment, it made me think immediately of what was said on the floor in Tennessee by one of the Republican delegates to, I believe it was Justin Pearson. And you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. Basically, very condescendingly saying, this is not how things work here. He may as well have said, boy, he didn't, but it was, it was in there. And there's this underlying, maybe not so much underlying, because now it's just becoming, out in the open. A lot of people are angry and upset that the America they thought they knew is quote unquote gone. And what you're seeing from Republicans in Tennessee, from Republicans in Maryland, and quite frankly, from Republicans all across the country is backlash because they just don't like what they're seeing. People who they don't think should have the ability to make decisions that govern them are making those decisions, and they want to put those people in their place. And I think what they're going to find out very quickly is that they're speaking to an echo chamber of a very small minority of people who may think like them, but the rest of the country doesn't.
Let me say this, Donnie. Neil is correct in that there has always been underlying issues, but Tennessee was in the back of the minds of a lot of folks who were there on sine die because, they had just expelled 2 Black members of the House of Representatives in Tennessee. But that other thing that I know as an individual who's been covering this for a long time, Speaker's very deft at kind of, nope, we're not going to do it like that. And I think a lot of times what happens is, and Dayvon, correct me if I'm wrong, is that when you wield that gavel, and understand, I've seen a lot of people wield gavels in that body, from Mike Miller to Mike Bush, and let me tell you, it's powerful. I've seen bills that would literally come to the desk, and they get stuck in a drawer, and you never see the light of day. The other part of that is this: the numbers don't lie. There is a supermajority in the House, in the legislature, of Democrats. There are very few things, unless the Democratic majority wants to see them come out, will let come out. There were a number of bills this session regarding juvenile crime, and they basically were left on the floor. And I know that, a number of people were pushing them, i.e. Ivan Bates, but he couldn't get the body politic. Understand this. Politics is about counting. And I've always said that. If you can't count, you can't win. And I think a lot of times people say, well, why won't they just listen? Well, when you have the numbers don't lie.
Kenny Brown, can you confirm this?
I can confirm. Donnie, I read your piece a week ago, a week and a half ago. These are not your grandfather's legislators anymore. They know they have the power now, so they're doing what they believe they need to do, and there's a lot of older, and I'm not going to say older, but a lot of Republicans can't get their head around this, that we're not in control anymore. And you can see the frustration. that they're going through in Annapolis over. Because with that supermajority, it's nothing that we want to do that they can stop us from doing. And that frustrates me. And I watch it on the Senate side, and some of the things they were doing over there just to stall was just unbelievable. But that was the game they were running. And when they found out that, and Madam Speaker, she shut it down on the House side. She said, well, we're not going to play this game over. And she did say, I'll give you 2 minutes, but they wanted more. They wanted to run the clock out, and it just didn't happen.
Dayvon, have you been paying attention to the governor in all of this? I mean, he's over in the UK with Rishi Sunak. Does this fall into your portrait of Annapolis?
So let me say two things, and if it's okay, Donnie, I want to say something quickly about what was just said before I get to that, which is that in addition to the Democratic Party supermajority and the Republicans being a minority that could be functionally frozen out, Speaker Jones has also appointed a bunch of black chairs of committees. And I think that's also particularly important as well. Because when you look at, Ways and Means, that's Vanessa Atterbury, Economic Matters, that's C.T. Wilson. When you look at HGO, Jocelyn Pena-Melnick, right? So these are, black folks that have been elevated to leadership in the House in ways that was not the case under Bush. And it's my belief that, given the circumstances, they wouldn't have did what they did to Speaker Jones to Speaker Bush. Right? I just think that's really clear and important to state up front. To your question, on the issue that we were working on, that was the bill that caused the controversy. I've been trying to get the Westmore administration to weigh in because it's an issue that they campaigned on. The criminal justice system's impact on Black people. Cannabis board prohibition policy is one of those policies that has been detrimental to our community. Is something that Westmore campaigned on as a candidate. And so we've been trying to get him to speak up and to weigh in on this issue. And again, our bill was the last bill, so it took everything for us to be able to eke it out. But his help would have certainly been helpful, given the fact he's governor. I mean, I do want to say that, it's his first, year as governor. I'm sure he has a lot of stuff he's got to stand up, agencies, they have to fill vacancies for and all that. So to some extent, I want to give him some grace and give him some time to really get stood up as an administration. But my hope is that the administration will be more involved in the legislature, as I think previous governors have been. As a person who's done legislative advocacy at this point for about 10 years, the administration has usually had a presence on major issues. That I don't think that was really the case this year. My hope is that it would change moving forward.
Neil, the governor is hanging out with Rishi Sunak. Some call him the Barack Obama of the UK.
Governor can hang out with the governor wants to hang out with. I think Governor Moore's done fine so far. Like Dayvon was saying, it's really early. He's getting all the pieces in place. I think this probably was a very good legislative session for him. I don't follow this as closely as the rest of you, but I don't know that there are going to be any bills that come to his desk that he isn't going to sign. So that's as good a start as you can get. I want to circle back really briefly to something that Charles and Kenny alluded to, because this is something that's been that I've been thinking about a lot over the last, 2 to 3 years even. And we use the phrase, these aren't your grandfather's politicians. I think that one of the biggest problems we have structurally, both state and nationally, is the entire incentive structure for politicians has completely changed. For the longest time, for all of our lifetimes, it used to be that your incentive as a politician was to get legislation passed, get pork passed for your district, go, get money so you could build this, you could build that, so you could, build bridges and hospitals and parks and what have you, and then go to your district and tell them what a great job you did for them. And that was our system for a long time, and it worked because people work collaboratively to help each other. And it was designed to benefit the citizenry ultimately. That's no longer the case. right? That is no longer the incentive structure that exists in politics today. Today, the incentive structure is divided up into mini echo chambers, and it's unfortunately the second time I've had to use that phrase, where people are just ginning up their base. And you see this far more on the Republican side than the Democrat side. It's not about passing legislation. It's not about affecting change. It's about going to say inflammatory things, to be difficult, to tell the Speaker of the House to sit down so that can get you a speaking spot on Fox News so you can raise money because you're one of the tough guys, right? That's the new incentive structure, and it is awfully, awfully debilitating to our political system.
Hey, Donnie, I
Charles?
want to drill down on something that Dayvon said about the governor. The governor didn't get everything that he wanted, okay? And I think, you get a lot of goodwill when you're the first-time governor. Larry Hogan got that as well. One of the things he didn't get was, he asked for an extra year of service following high school. It's basically a demonstration project. It is not the full implementation of what he wanted. The other issue was this idea of boost, which gives money to individuals who are going to parochial and private schools. He stood up against that, but he got pushback from the Senate. And early on in this session, I had asked the president of the Senate, what happens when the two of you don't see eye to eye? And he gave me kind of a flippant answer. But the bottom line is he can only propose, and he hopes, as we like to say, that everything moves forward. And Dayvon is correct about the cannabis thing. He was more concerned about whether or not there were going to be enough minorities who were going to get licenses in order to sell actual marijuana. The idea of having police not, stop people under the premise of we smell marijuana. Understand it. It's legal in the state. And it's difficult for a mindset of police officers across the state, from local jurisdictions to state police, to get past that. One of the things that was really surprising to me was when the time came for Roland Butler to become the superintendent and how much pushback he got. Understand this. There are members of the state police, including the black state police officers, who don't like this guy. But he was able to get across the finish line. We'll see how that turns out.
Come on, Kenny, I see you smiling.
Yeah, well, I tell you what, I have taken a wait and see because, again, let's look at it. I saw our new governor coming in as a non-political, and I wondered how he was going to wield going in what we call the experts, or those who have all the experience in Annapolis, walking into that room and saying, "Okay, guys, I'm in charge, and here's how we're going to do it." I think he played it masterfully the first 90 days here, and I think, and back to what he weighed in on and what he didn't weigh in on, I think he knew in the background. I have my generals out there, I have my lieutenants, and they've all assured me that we're moving in the right direction and we'll get things done. So I think sitting at the table, he held his chips. He knew when he needed to push them out on the table, and he knew when to bet and when to hold back. And what I was very proud to see was, again, as I was leaving the Senate chamber to go over to the House, we both came down the steps around the same time, because it's my understanding he was in his office watching everything that was going on in the House. But as soon as that gavel went down, he was down going to see the Speaker. He wanted to make sure everything was good, and I tell you what, if you have to give him a grade, Charles, and the rest of you, would you give him a B plus A for his first 90 days in session? I would.
I would give him a B.
Mm-hmm.
Dayvon, what grade would you give him?
Oh man, I don't know.
Incomplete.
Yeah, let's say incomplete. I want to see a session where, because again, I get it. He has a lot of stuff he has to stand up.
Right.
And I just think on an issue that if you campaign on an issue, you know what I'm saying? I just think that it's important to be present and have, folks that are, from the administration working on the issue. And that wasn't the case on the criminal justice side of the cannabis stuff. So yeah, I would have a hard time grading them. My hope is that, and I was told by someone in the administration that they're looking to come back next year if there are things that need to be done on that front, that they will want to work on that next year. So I'll reserve, serious criticism, after, having a full year to really get stood up and get things going.
Neil, do the governor's words match his actions?
Yeah, I'm sitting here thinking I'm probably the most lenient grader of all of us. I'd give him an A minus. I think it is always difficult having that first legislative session right when you take office, and I think Kenny's point is right. It's especially difficult when you are not a versed politician, and I think he's handled everything. He hasn't stepped on any rakes, and they're out there, and not stepping on any rakes counts as a win for me. So I would give him an A minus.
Charles, you're biting your lip.
Well, understand this. The governor is one of the greatest schmoozers that I have ever met. And he does it effortlessly, if you will. I've seen, everybody who comes in contact with him, he makes you believe like you're the only person in the room. And that's a skilled politician who understands. And he will take more selfies than anybody I've ever met in the political vein. Now, what that does is that disarms you if you have a particular opinion that you don't agree with him on. As I like to say,
this guy not only will mentally joust you, that he's pretty buff, and he'll probably beat you in a 12-round fight. Is that what it is?
Yeah, well, look, I saw him.
Dayvon's not scared. Dayvon says he will go those 12 rounds. Let's go.
What's funny about that, one of the things he did during this session was, he went down to Atlanta to meet with the Orioles. Understand this, they've got a new chair of the Maryland Stadium Authority. And Craig Thompson, who I've known for a number of years.
First African-American.
Right, and he's a very smooth operator. I mean, I've had to consult him on some legal issues I've had. And part of that is that he was taking notes during those sessions. And I'm going like, why the heck is he taking notes? Because he understood. Then what I thought was even more fascinating, he decided to take batting practice with the Orioles. Let me just tell you, he can hit the ball. There was another.
I'm not worried about hitting the ball. Can he catch a routine fly ball? Because they may want to stick him in the outfield.
Well, wait a minute. Let me just say this, Neil, that there was a viral video that went out of him sinking a three-pointer, and then he challenged Glenn Youngkin, the governor of Virginia, to a shoot off to get the FBI building in Maryland. This dude, you're right, he's buff. You don't want to go round and round with this guy. But that is part of what I call the allure. I mean, here's a guy who tries, I used to talk about Larry Hogan as the guy you want to have a beer with. Okay? I think this governor is the guy you want to go, hey, let's go shoot some hoops. And he'll probably say, sure, let's go.
Okay, well, Charles, he's over in the UK right now. Any thoughts on meeting with the Prime Minister?
I think he's trying to sell his message to a global audience.
What about the money? He's meeting with philanthropists, big money people. Is that the show his prowess in the realm of the people with the money, the hedge funders,
I understand this.
the nonprofits,
This guy is a
international
prolific
NGOs.
fundraiser. Don't
Yeah.
get it twisted.
He's a machine.
The Democratic Central Committee has asked him to go out and help them raise money. I don't think it's lost on anybody in this group that at some point, this guy, he's already on a national stage. But as my good friend Roland Martin told me, Charles, he hasn't done anything yet.
He can raise money.
Right, but he can raise a lot of money, not just little bits.
He can raise money. And Neil, does he not fit into the same category at this juncture with Kamala Harris?
In what sense? You mean as a national prominent figure?
Well, he's skipped the national. He's went straight to international. Is he not trying to put himself in the same conversation with Kamala Harris, with
yes,
Barack Obama?
so yes and no. I don't think anybody who either knows or has seen Westmore doesn't recognize what we all see, which is that he has national aspirations that are very viable. If you're asking me whether those national aspirations are 2024, it's way too early. So I'm a little hesitant to make the Kamala Harris comparison, simply because if Joe Biden ends up not running, she's a viable contender next year, and that's just way too soon for Westmore, but it's coming.
Dayvon, you are the future. You are the present. You get the benefit of these elders and their wisdom. What do you see?
I mean, I think, as was just mentioned by Neil, I think it's obvious that he has national aspirations. I think there are a lot of people who anticipate that, he'll move into the national stage. I think that, the philanthropy and many of the money interests behind him expect him to take that leap nationally, which, I don't fault him for. I mean, I think, he's doing what, naturally a lot of people in that position would do.
Did Martin O'Malley make the same mistake? He was so busy focused down the road that he left some things undone right here on the gubernatorial level. Kenny?
Donnie, I don't even know how you put those two names together. O'Malley.
I was thinking the same thing, Kenny. I'm glad you said it.
I don't even know how you put those two names together, man.
Was the day and night conversation?
That's right. They're not even in the same room. No. But your point of whether or not this guy's got his aspirations, of course he does. And you know what I respect more, and I'm going to go back to his state police superintendent. I like the fact that once he decided this was his guy, even when they were telling him, no, it's not your guy, he wouldn't back away from it. That says something about it. Again, you're the new governor. Yes, you have to go in and you have to pick your fight, you pick your battles. But that was one battle he wasn't willing to walk away from.
Can we say the same thing for the young lady he wanted to put on the Maryland Stadium Authority? What was her name? Maria? Well, I mean, she had a ton. She owed Jesus and the disciples. She had a long list of debtors.
I scratched my head on who was pushing her. How did she even get to his table? But they said they vetted her. They knew. They said they knew all this. But
come on, could they have vetted her, Kenny?
Hey, I can't believe you're going for something like that and you're not vetted.
Charles, when you go for these nominations, they want to know who you slept with in the 6th grade. I mean, they want to know everything about you.
I think the thing that was very interesting about the selection is that did they dig deep enough?
Or was this like, hey, we tried.
Well, understand this. Like I said, he hasn't had all wins. He had another cabinet.
That was like a layup that you intentionally missed.
Right. Well, the thing is that he had one nominee for a cabinet position who withdrew. Will this woman withdraw? I don't know. But the person that he's depending on is Craig Thompson, who's the chair of the Maryland Stadium Authority. A lot of people don't get this. the Maryland Stadium Authority is running a number of large entities with, I'm not talking millions, I'm talking billions of dollars. That includes the Ravens. That includes the Orioles. It includes the lottery money that funds all of this.
$15 billion has come through the Maryland State Stadium Authority since 1973. Football stadium, baseball stadium. Yet, Dayvon, we got schools with no air and no heat in Baltimore City. Where's the damn money?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think that's one of the things that, now what's interesting is that, Republicans have been more forceful in, making that point than I think the Democrats have, given the relationship that Democrats traditionally have with all of the interests that are behind public education. But I think to your other point, one of the things I want to say something about in terms of Governor Moore's political aspirations and the comparison between O'Malley, I think the key will be whether or not those national aspirations will serve as rationale for policies that don't necessarily deliver, particularly for Black people here in the state of Maryland. And my hope is that those national aspirations do not create an environment where there's more incentive to focus on things that'll get national attention as opposed to the things that we need here, in Maryland, in Baltimore City. I'm hopeful that he will make the right choice, and that he will advance, the condition here of Black people here in Maryland. But that's certainly a dilemma that I think he's going to have to resolve.
Okay, but now you guys have mentioned some things. You say O'Malley's not even in this conversation. Charles, who is the guy that's now running MDOT?
He's a former
Paul Wheelfeld, right?
Right, Wheelfeld.
Wasn't he here before during the O'Malley administration?
Yes, but
wasn't he the one that got rid of Ricky Smith the last time?
I can't answer that question.
Kenny?
I don't have the answer to that one either. But go ahead, Donnie. Do you know that?
But here's that thing, and I asked the governor on Sine Die about this. Traffic in Maryland is abysmal. Let me just say, if you're on the Beltway right now, and I hope you aren't watching us while you're driving, but it is horrible. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but at 3:00, don't go near the Washington Capitol Beltway. You might as well be in a parking lot, and it's getting as bad here in Baltimore. Remind yourself that before Larry Hogan left, he had presented this idea of having a private entity build an extra lane and charging people to ride around the Capitol Beltway. First of all, that daggone project was going to take 10 to 15 years to build. And most of the people in the Montgomery County and Prince George's area were like, so you're going to make us pay to sit in traffic or to get out of traffic? Well, guess what? That whole issue went away because the private contractor says, we're not interested. One of the things that a lot of people don't understand is that American Legion Bridge down in Montgomery County is going to crumble to the ground in 10 years if you don't rebuild it. You have to come up with better solutions. And the other part of that is that MDOT is where many of the MBEs have been shut out of doing major construction projects.
That's exactly why I'm asking you about Paul J. Wiedefeld, because he gets his seat back on the board. He gets to run MDOT, and he resigned from this very agency 8 months ago, or I guess 10 at this point. But he was over at.
Well, he was on WMATA. He was on WMATA. That's what he resigned.
WMATA, in Washington, D.C.
Yes, correct.
So he went from MDOT to WMATA, and I understand that there's, they aren't all that thrilled with him in that realm.
Look, you're going to be damned if you do and damned if you don't with this whole transportation thing. I think all of us
This guy was in the O'Malley administration. He's back.
Right. I think what the governor does is give marching orders. You know, people don't take, I don't take for granted that this guy's a military guy. Understand this. In the infamous words of, back in Germany, just make the trains run on time. He can't make those trains run on time. But what he can do is say how he wants things done. One of the things he said to me on Sine Die was, we have to get out of this idea of whack-a-mole. In other words, we got a problem here, hit it, fix it. That's not going to work in this state. Understand, you got to have a long-term solution and a short-term solution. Understand this. The Purple Line, which is supposed to run from Prince George's County all the way over to Montgomery County, is both over budget. Not only is it over budget, it is delayed, and they're talking about they got to kick in some more dollars to make this daggone thing work.
Well, Charles, will he bring back the red line?
I don't think it's going to come back in the form that we think it is. I mean,
and times have changed. The landscape has moved. You got to come up with a better plan that fits.
And the red line now. The red line is, before I got on this call with you, Donnie, I was looking at a proposal that they had for all of the subway lines that were supposed to be created in the city of Baltimore. There's only one, but there was supposed to be 7. And it was supposed to be on a 15, 20-year plan. And the red line was part of that. And one of the things I have learned about this governor is he can get laser focused on issues that are populist. In other words, you tell people, hey, I want to redo the red line. Dayvon, you and I know that all the jobs that surround Baltimore and the suburbs, and people are having hell and paying hell to try and get to those jobs. And that argument of the NIMBY not in my backyard, I saw it play out in the Hunt Valley. This is not what I would call a simple idea. And part of that is changing minds. But with that changing minds, and Neil, you can address this idea, is that there is fear. There's fear that you're going to bring all those poor Black folks in the city and those brown folks in the city out to suburbia, and y'all are going to change the way our life is. Well, guess what? Life is going to change, whether you want it to or not.
Hey, Neil, life certainly changed for Donald John Trump.
Ha! Did it?
Oh, it didn't?
Yeah, you mean with being indicted?
Yes, this is unprecedented.
Hey, Donnie.
Until the next one.
Hey, Donnie, he's got that same scenario. He just plans to run the clock out. He figured by the time they get to me, I could be in a box in the ground someplace. He will run the clock.
I'll tell you, to me, big picture, what is surprising isn't that he was indicted. I don't particularly like this case. That's a different conversation that we can have if you want. But to me, the surprising thing is not that he was indicted, is that it took him over 70 plus years of his life of engaging in the activity that he's done to finally be indicted for anything. That to me is a far bigger surprise. This guy's been a crook his entire life.
What about the legalities of the case, and what about others that want to charge him?
Yeah, so working backwards on that, I think the far stronger cases are the ones that haven't yet brought indictments. There's the Georgia case that Fannie Willis is investigating related to his fraudulently trying to pressure election officials to change the vote outcome in Georgia. And then, of course, you have the classified documents case that Jack Smith is investigating. This one is, I think, legally the weakest of the cases because, and again, I'll make this quick, he's being charged specifically with filing fraudulent business records, right, which is a crime. The problem is that to simply file fraudulent business records, there is a 2-year statute of limitations. He couldn't be indicted while he was president. So as soon as he leaves office, January of 2021, if they hadn't charged him with that within 2 years, he doesn't get the statute of limitations passes. The only way they could charge him is if they claim that his filing fraudulent business records was furthering a different crime. And if that's the case, then it becomes a felony, which has a 5-year statute of limitations, and they no longer have the statute of limitations problem. The issue in this case for Alvin Bragg is the crime they're alleging that they're linking this to was a campaign finance crime. The problem is that's a federal crime that was never charged, right? Even the Biden Justice Department has had the last 2 years to look at this and determine whether or not they were going to charge Donald Trump with the underlying crime, and they chose not to. And so I think legally, Alvin Bragg has a problem because if he can't link the business records to another crime, statute of limitations has run, and he's trying to link it to a crime that's a federal crime that the feds never charged.
Okay, so what about in other, like the state of Georgia, election tampering?
Much stronger case, at least based on what I see. They have him on tape telling an election official that he has to find 11,000 votes. There's no getting around the fact that he's on tape, and pressuring an election official. And then on the classified documents thing, to me, that's going to be his biggest problem. Not because he had classified documents. It seems to me that just about anybody in government appears to have. They definitely have to change their processes of how they keep classified documents because everybody seems to have them. The issue isn't that he had them. The issue is what happened to lead him to having, meaning did he take them deliberately? And most importantly, did he obstruct justice when they came calling to get them back? If he lied, if he obstructed, and basically he's going all over television. He's every lawyer's nightmare, by the way, as a client. He doesn't pay his legal bills, and he goes on TV and admits to crimes. If he knew that he had classified documents, was engaging with the FBI and lied to them and had his lawyer file false affidavits and then claim he turned over everything and didn't, that is obstruction. And that is just like anything else. The cover up is always worse than the crime. He's going to, that is probably the biggest legal jeopardy he's facing, in my opinion.
Do you see Donald Trump being able to run for president? That's what
absolutely.
He will be able to run for president.
Oh my God. He could go to prison and he'll still be the Republican nominee. I'm not even kidding.
Dayvon, what does this say about the future of this country? You have Justin Jones and Justin Pearson on one hand, and then you have the Donald Trumps and the supermajority Tennessee legislature on the other hand. Where is this country going? Do you feel comfortable?
I think one of the things that Donald Trump was able to do that I think that, Black folks that are engaged in politics need to think about and take more seriously is that Donald Trump represents a base. That base may be relatively small. That base may be crazy and white nationalists in their politics, but he has a base that he capitulates to, a base that he speaks directly to what their interests are. And so I think it's going to be important that, if we're serious about making sure that those kind of elements don't come to power, I think, Black people, particularly, those, given the nature of our politics, the two-party system, Black people being more prominent in the Democratic Party, we're going to need to make sure that we have folks that deliver on policy for Black people and that represent Black people in a way where we're able to mobilize our base. I think too often we're relying on, the donors and social media and, forces that aren't necessarily the people of our community. And so I think it's going to be important for those that are engaged in politics to focus on building a grassroots base of Black folks in the community in order to combat the grassroots mobilization of the far right, that regardless of what we think about Trump, being incompetent, being crazy, being an extension of white nationalist politics, they have a base of power and have been able to wield it in ways that has been detrimental to our community. we need to shore up our base and make sure that our communities are engaged and mobilized the same.
Neil, you wanted to touch on a case down on the Eastern Shore.
Yeah. Again, I'll try to be brief. This one's near and dear to my heart. There was about last July, a 14-year-old kid was killed in a hit and run accident in Berlin, Maryland. The police have been undertaking an investigation. There are allegations that the person who committed the hit and run is connected to a family that's somewhat prominent in the Ocean City, Eastern Shore area. And it has led to a little bit of not only an outpouring support in the community, but has become a very, very high profile case out there. No charges have yet been filed. I have the sad privilege of representing the family of the 14-year-old. As we move forward, we await criminal charges, and then eventually there'll be a civil case that follows. But it has started to gain more statewide attention, mainly not only because of the facts of the case, but also because of the, again, alleged identity of the family that may be involved here, and allegations that they have failed to cooperate through the investigative process. The Baltimore Banner ran an article on this a few weeks ago that is worth looking at if anybody's interested. And again, it's just going to generate more statewide attention, and especially all over Ocean City, there are signs of justice for Gavin, do it for Gavin. The boy's name was Gavin Knupp. It's the Knupp family that suffered this horrendous and tragic loss. And you see signs everywhere over the Eastern Shore. And I think this happened July of 2022, right towards the end of the vacation season in Ocean City. And so the rest of the state has sort of been shielded to some degree from the story. I think as the spring and summer months come upon us and people start venturing more into Ocean City, as many Marylanders do every year, I think that they're going to be exposed to and touched by the story. Has a long way to go. Again, we anticipate at some point criminal charges being filed, and when the criminal case is over, there'll be a civil case as well. But it is a story that has a lot of legs. It reminds, in many respects, I don't know if anybody followed the Murdaugh case in South Carolina, but there are a lot of similarities. Rich and powerful families allegedly not only engaging in certain behavior, but then thinking they can use their power and influence to cover it up.
Kenny, Northwest Voice newspaper, what have you been covering? What are you working on? What's the future of the paper?
Well, I tell you, the future of the paper and newspapers in general, we're still pounding away at it, man. And the thing I'm really looking at, and I brought up Redline because...
And by the way, you publish 15,000 newspapers from Catonsville to Pikesville on a monthly basis.
Catonsville, Woodlawn, Randallstown, Owings Mills, Ricerstown, after that northwest part of Baltimore County. Yes, sir. We're out there trying to deliver that local news. And local news is important because, again, people need to know what's going on in their own backyard. But Charles, when I brought up the red line and we were talking, and you're talking about transportation, I'm thinking about those jobs that are going to be on the east side of the county via Trade Point. Those jobs are $30, $40, $50 an hour jobs. How do we get people to those jobs over there? And transportation is going to be key. The east part of the county is exploding. Tons of jobs will be there. And we have tons of people on the other side of the county, and they have to be able to get there. So,
and you got a new police chief in Baltimore County.
That I tell you what, we're happy about that. It should have happened before. We let two get away. One ended up in Texas, who should have been the police chief, but at that time we had a county executive.
And this is a black man.
Black man who started at Baltimore County when he was 18 years old as a cadet. Did his entire career at Baltimore County Police, had risen all the way through the ranks. When it came time to being the chief, they were looking in other directions. And he wasn't considered a candidate. But after he retires, and remember, we had Chief Hyatt there, who our county exec went to Baltimore City to find this young lady to come out. And she found out real quick that she didn't understand the Baltimore County culture, especially when it came to the police department. so she wasn't successful. And then, so he had to remove her. And then removing her, he had to go and find a replacement. And we pulled this guy back out of retirement. And he's a great choice. Great
Charles,
choice.
this was the first time you've ever been invited to the mansion. And I'm just perplexed because you are the senior journalist in the state of Maryland, black or white. What in the hell happened?
Well, it's interesting when you get these kind of invites.
And who the hell is Bootsy?
Well, Bootsy was Marvin Mandel's former wife, and she stayed in the mansion. And I mentioned this to the governor, and the governor said, well, yeah, there's a portrait of her. She's just up on the stairs. But look, I get a lot of unusual invites. Some I accept, some I don't. But I was very interested to see the inside of the mansion.
And what'd you see, Charles?
First and foremost, I'm always observant of the paintings that are on the walls, because many of them are of historical significance. Probably the one that struck me the most was the portrait of Frederick Douglass, which was commissioned by Sylvia and Eddie Brown. It had been in the back of the mansion, and Governor
in
Moore
the back of the mansion,
and Governor Moore moved it to the front.
Neil, Frederick Douglass was the most photographed American of his era.
Yeah, and the thing is that, when you have a sea change, you begin to see in a much broader light things that heretofore may have been in the background.
I saw a picture of him in that damn yacht you were talking about.
Yes, the governor has a yacht or a boat, whatever you want to call it, but it's a big boat.
Is Dayvon Love going to get a ride on that yacht?
You better ask somebody.
Come on, Dayvon, your thoughts. You're the future. You're the present.
Hey, Donnie, are you going to get a ride on
I don't
that
know
boat?
about it. I don't know about an invite to the boat. But I think
you keep giving up incompletes. I don't know.
Yeah. I think
that's why I gave the A-.
Yeah. I think just in terms of the state of our politics, I mean, I hope that Governor Moore is successful. There were some things that he did that I thought were good, outside of session. And my hope though is that whatever needs to happen for our community, that we're able to organize effectively enough to make it happen. It doesn't matter how friendly or how much we like the governor. It's always important as a community that we have the machinery of politics needed to make elected officials do what they need to do, as opposed to relying on their goodwill. And so my hope is that that'll be the culture of how we deal with not just the governor, but the legislature as well.
Charles,
I want to end on one little thing.
Charles, I got to ask you, I got to cut you. The significance of having a Dayvon Love and Adam Jackson, the leaders of a beautiful struggle in Annapolis. Please, before you comment.
Sure. First and foremost, I've been big fans of theirs long before they were popular. And the thing is that, you must have grassroots efforts in order to move that process forward. But here's that thing, and I think it's not lost on any of us. We are all saddened by the number of young people who have died at the hands of guns. I don't think there's a silver bullet, but I hope that each and every one of us will pray for their survivors and will allow them to, if you will, find grace in this world.
Gentlemen, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, just a pleasure sharing the stage with all you guys. Great conversation.
Donnie, you have a way of bringing together a perfect group to have a discussion with. So thank you for this morning.
Dayvon, you get the final word, big brother.
Hey, thanks, Donnie. Appreciate the invite. Anytime. Hope to come back on.
How can people follow your work and the work that your legislative agenda? I'm proud of the work that you've done. There's no one from our community, at least from Baltimore, doing the work that you are doing. And when I have questions, I get to ask you. You know, sometimes you're doing things I don't understand, and you guys answer the phone and you tell us. But how do we get more younger? And we're all older than you. That's the only thing I'm saying. How do we get more younger people involved? Because frankly, it's impressive. And sooner.
I appreciate that. I think, we're going to do our part. We're actually doing a camp this summer for young people who are interested in civic leadership. I just think giving young people an opportunity to be in environments where they can learn the history of the work that's been done. I know for us, we've been intentional about learning that Black Baltimore movement history that's really given us, the blueprint to understand the landscape and how to operate. So I think really having spaces like this and others, folks, like yourselves who know some of these, know the Parent Mitchells, the Marion Bascom's, the Verta Welcomes,
I got a name for you. I got a name for you before you go. You ever heard of Isaac Myers?
Yes, sir. Isaac Myers, black trade unionist, 19th century.
Started right here in Baltimore.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Good deal. Mr. Robinson, Mr. Brown, Mr. Neil Dubo Law, Dayvon Love, thank you very much. I hope that we served our community well.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Donnie.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Donnie.
All right.
Good morning, world.